Deafrowe with Deafrowe TV, and I'm back again with another review. And for this review, I'm going to be doing part 3 of the miniseries from BBC called The Day of the Triffids. But before I get started on this review, please remember to like, subscribe, and share. Hit that notification bell so you can see part 4, 5, and 6, or you can go back and watch part 1 and 2. Now let's get started on this review of part 3 of The Day of the Triffids, one of my favorite miniseries, and you'll see why when we get going on with this review. And here we are. We left off where they were trying to go around this horde of blind people that is currently ransacking like a food truck, and it's blocking the road. So Bill has decided he's going to try to like run up on the curb and go around the truck, which ends up obviously not working like we saw in the last episode. They kind of like gain up on the vehicle trying to see, well, not they're not seeing anything, but they're trying to feel around and see if and try to find somebody in the vehicle because they know they can see because they're in the vehicle. So that's the whole thing behind that. And of course, this gets the episode started. And like I said, they're surrounded by these blind people and then trapped in this car trying to get out. And what Bill decides to do is to unlock one of the back doors and let them try to come in. And then him and Joe try to creep out the front passenger door or driver door in this case and try to escape. And so that's kind of what they do right here. Let's see right here. Yeah, Bill like looking around, see how he can get out. Unlocks his door first, as quietly as he can, because he know they can really hear really good. And so they're making so much noise that they don't know which door is unlocking or what. And he gets Joe and him out of the vehicle and around the corner, and they pretty much escape the small little horde of blind folks that are trying to basically it they come to realize from this little episode right here with a horde of blind folks is if these blind people find out that they can see, they immediately grasp onto you and will not let you go. And Joe has already had a bad experience with this, and so now they both have experienced something just similar of these blind people basically just trying to capture them. I mean, that's what it seems like in this. And they go around the corner, and of course she's crying about the whole ordeal, and they find another vehicle, a little van, and pretty much hijack the van and just keep going. And later on in this, they come across an apartment. It's like and the reason they get this apartment is because it's like a show apartment, and so they know that nobody's living in it. It's just a one that they would show off as a model home, like a model apartment for other people to rent. And so they figured they found this like model apartment to stay in. Of course, it doesn't have any food or anything like that in it, no flashlights and all this stuff like a normal house would have in it. So they're kind of making do with what they have, and as you can see here, they do get the anti-Triffic gear like Bill was wanting to get, and he's kind of messing around with it right now. It's like this blade thrower, and so yeah, Bill's messing around with the anti-Triffic gear while Joe is trying to whip up something to eat that night, and she's wearing like this nice little dress and makeup and everything, making it all fancy looking. And she's like, "Why the hell not? I mean, nobody else is going to see it. Might as well let you see it." And so yeah, they're talking about all the different things that's going on, and she realizes since they're in a model apartment, there's no cutlery or anything to eat the food with. But Bill, while he was getting the anti-Triffic gear, was able to pick up a couple of like Swiss knives or uh, basically camping type gear as well as the anti-Triffic gear, and so that's kind of what they eat with is the camping gear that they got from the warehouse that he got the Triffids gear from. And so they're sitting around, talking. You see there the camping coffee mugs there. Anyway, they're sitting around and they're talking about the events that as they are unfolding and what they should be doing or what they think they should be doing. And what it comes down to is they don't know like where exactly to go. And Bill's like saying, "Well, we got to find somewhere that's kind of secluded, so we're not surrounded by people always trying to capture us because we can see." And plus, once these people start doing things and panicking in the streets in these towns, it's going to be chaos. People are going to die in the street, and then there's not going to be anybody to pick up the dead bodies or anything like that. So the smell is going to be horrendous of people dying left and right of just accidents in general, not even just people fighting each other or anything. And so they decide, Bill decides to get out like a notepad and make a list, of things they need in places they would probably need they could go to. And she mentions like a little mansion outside the. She mentions, yeah, it's like a friend of hers that has like this house that is uh self-contained, I guess you could say. They like have a windmill and everything for electricity. They have their own water in a well and everything else, so it's completely independent, away from needing any city or you know rural area type connections. And that's what she's talking about. And Bill's like, that sounds like the place we need to get to. And so they kind of decide right here and then that that's kind of what they want to do. But then, things, can change either way. So now, yeah, they're talking about, and then she's talking about the old farmhouse and where it's located and everything. Now, let's see, go back just a little bit. At this point, Bill sees something flashing in the window. There we go. It's a good spot. And somebody is sending out a signal in light at the very top of a building, and he's trying to figure out where it is at night. So he marks a spot on the window so the next day he can check and see exactly where it is. And he thinks it's basically like the university tower nearby of a school. And that's what they decide. Hey, if there's other sighted people, maybe we need to get up with them rather than just make our own plans like this. Maybe they got a better plan, so they decide we'll check it out in the morning and see what their deal is and see if we agree with them or disagree or whatever. So that kind of ends the conversation for the night for them on that matter. Well, and then cut to this older couple right here that is completely blind. And this is kind of like they're trying to give you an example of what's happening with these Triffids that are out and about. And this older couple basically has a string. She has a string tied around her, and then the other side of the string is tied around her husband, who's kind of like making his way into their garden in the backyard to gather up some vegetables like lettuce and tomatoes or whatever. And of course, they're petrified. They don't even know what time it is. Of course, it's dark out. You see the husband's out there trying to make it to the garden, and he doesn't. He's over there getting stuff, but something's right around the corner. Obviously, it's Triffid waiting for him. Yeah, there's the bottom of the Triffid right there. I don't know. They show like the little stumps that help them move. Anyway, but then the string pops, and she's like, "Oh crap, what's going on?" And then she realized, like she's calling out to her husband, Tom, what is it? What's going on? and realize he had just been stung and killed by a Triffid because they're in a rural area. And that's one of the things that Bill, you know, says is because the rural areas are going to be hard to escape from the Triffids because it's not wide open. They can be hiding right around the corner in these little small pieces of land that they can migrate to and move around on. So you don't. They can move across concrete and stuff, but only at short distances. They can't, go the entire time on concrete like in the inner cities and stuff. But in the rural areas, they can transfer. They can like go across the road from one piece of land to another, pretty much. And that's what's happening here. Is the Triffid has stung and killed this blind man trying to get vegetables out of his garden. And we cut back to Bill and Joe back at this little show apartment, and they're having a hard time sleeping because they hear all the noises from the neighbors, well, neighbors, people in the streets, all this other stuff going on, people crying, people just screaming out, praying, all the whole 9 yards. Stuff's going on in the middle of the night because they're blind. They can't see anything. They don't know whether it's daytime or nighttime. They don't know it's time to go to sleep. So you got all these thousands of people around you that don't know whether it's day or night, and so they're out screaming and all kinds of stuff. And then finally it gets to Joe a little bit, and so they end up huddling together in the bed for the night because they can't stand the noises that are going on outside. And then next day we finally get to that area, the university place that Bill was talking about, where the light blinking was coming from, the signaling was coming from, and we meet this guy whose name's Coker, played by Maurice Coburn, and Coker is a sighted guy who has taken on like 20 or so people to follow him around, help him find food and shelter and all this other stuff, try to help him get around. And he's pissed off that these military guys inside this fence, inside this university area, are not doing more to help the community in the area. He thinks they should just, drop whatever their plans are and just start helping folks like they should be, all this other stuff. And of course, you got Major Anderson here, who's on the inside of the fence here, played by Dennis DeMarn. And he's telling them, it's like, we're not letting you in. We let you in, but we're not letting all of them in. And Coker's like, no, you need to do what I tell you to do. You need to be out here helping folks. That's what you're supposed to do. But see, Coker has this grand idea of helping all these folks. And if I could just get enough sighted people doing what I want them to do, it's like he's basically imposing his own ideas and will on other sighted folks because he thinks that's the right thing to do. But the problem is the the blind outnumber the sighted, and you can really only do so much before you're overwhelmed or you could possibly be killed by folks just trying to get help from you. And so these military folks are like, no, we're not letting them in. We're not letting you in because you're trying to, cause a ruckus about all this whole thing. And it's not going to work. So yeah, Bill and Joe decide to sneak in the back into the university from the back side because they see what's going on with Coker in the front, and they decide they don't want nothing to do with that. So see that, like I said, they tell Coker you can come in by yourself, but the rest of the folks have to clear off. And Coker's like, that's not right. So he grabs Major Anderson's arm and pulls him against the fence, and gets all the blind folks to like grab him, hold on to him, like, oh, we're gonna make them let you in. But then one of the other military guys shoots a gun in the air, and all the blind folks just run off because they don't know whether they're getting shot or if the person next to them is getting shot or anything like that. They just know a gun's going off and they don't want to be killed. So you can see right here, it's like, no, don't, Tom. He's calling them all by name, like, don't go, don't go, stay your ground, you know. But they all leave him pretty much standing there at the fence. And that's when Bill and Joe have another conversation about what they should be doing, whether it's right or wrong. That they feel that they should, you know, keep each other safe rather than try to help other folks that are all the other folks that are blind. And Bill says, you know, your conscience wants you to help these people, but logically, you know, you can't because there's just too many. And eventually, you'll be so overwhelmed with just trying to keep up. And then on top of that, how many of these blind people are sick, dying already, or how many of these people are going to or get sick and cause and spread disease like crazy because they can't take care of themselves. They can't, you know, maintain themselves in certain way in certain instances unless they have help. So there's a lot of elements that they go over in this conversation about what they should or shouldn't do, and they finally just decide to see what these people have to say, and they meet up with the folks inside the university finally. So they go in, they start to talk to Mr. I would say Mr. Beadley, which is played by David Swift. He's an older gentleman. And Mr. Beadley's telling them, like, you know, what they plan to do, where they plan to go, and that kind of thing. That's the bald guy right here talking to Bill. He's like, well, the first thing you guys can do to show that you're, you know, willing participants in this, you know, help us out a little bit, you go get these supplies that we're needing. And Bill at this time is telling him, like, well, have you guys gotten any anti-traffic gear? And Mr. Beadley's like, I don't think we need that, but he said, well, they're running rampant. There's nobody to watch after them at the farms anymore. And Mr. Beadley is of the opinion that they've been devenom or docked pretty much like the. And Bill tries to explain to him, is like, no, they're not docked if they're part of the oil processing plant. So you're gonna have a bunch of them with full stingers coming out of that place. And so he's like, okay, do what you got to do, get what you need to get, just make sure you get these supplies that we're talking about. And so he sends Joe and Bill, you know, but he still tells Bill that the anti-traffic gear is not high priority, and Bill's like, no, it should be high priority. You don't understand. These things are out there, and Beatley doesn't really, you know, agree with him or in that, but he says go ahead and get the stuff anyway. So Bill and Joe go grab a couple of military trucks and go get the stuff that they were told to get. They make it back, you know, they're talking about all this stuff, and of course, you know, Beadley's still on to him about the anti-traffic gear, and Bill's like, "Look, just trust me on this. Please trust me on this. I know you don't believe me." And Bill even says he's got a shot coming because the further you get away from the, because for what Mr. Beadley says, look, we haven't seen any Triffids around here. And Bill says, of course you haven't. You're in the middle of a concrete jungle. This is like the desert to them. They're not going to come this far into the city. But once you start going out to the country, once you start going into the rural areas, they are going to be everywhere, and you're going to have a shot coming to you that you didn't know was right there, and I warned you about it. So he finally convinces Beatley to make sure that all the stuff gets taken into account, and that the anti-traffic gear is included. And then that night, the Dr. Vorlis, played by Andrea Miller, she basically sets up their plan for a new society. At first, one of the military guys tells them about the different vaccines they have and stuff that will be distributed out so none of them will get sick over a long period of time. That will help them, you know, because he said all it takes is one plague and we'll be wiped out because there's so few of us. And so that's, he basically says, I got enough for about a year for the amount of folks that are here, so we'll be good on that for a little while. And then that's when this Dr. Voilis comes up, played by Andrea Miller. She's talking about what we're going to have to do. And basically, just she sets out a guideline for what they're going to do. We can't. She basically tells everybody we cannot afford to have any men that are blind. On the other hand, we can afford to have women that are blind to a certain extent, as long as these women can, because women can make babies that are not blind. She says at this point, the men might have to have more than one spouse, could have 2 to 3 women, so they could have more babies and create more sighted people for the farms that we're going to have to, you know, do ourselves now. And it says, and that's one of the reasons he says we can't afford to have any unsighted men who can't farm and work like we need them to work. But we can afford to have a couple of here and there of not sighted women who can procreate, have babies. And to the extent that Bill and Joe are joking about this whole thing, and Joe ain't too fond of it all or anything, but Bill and Joe are, they're kind of joking right here about it. And Bill's like, "Well, if I had to pick, can you be my first wife?" And she's making a joke back to him. I was like, as long as I get to pick the second and third myself. And he's like, we could do that. And basically, they're weighing the options right here. She's like, which is a better choice to try to help a bunch of blind folks and possibly starve and get trapped with a bunch of people that will end up killing you, or to have babies in a community that will look after you so you're not having to worry about much. And yeah, the options seem kind of obvious. And uh, but she basically just tells him like, yeah, as long as I get to pick the 2 other girls, I'll stick with you, Bill. And they, basically kiss at this point, like, oh, that's cool, we get to stay together and all this nonsense. And so, anyway, that night as they're sleeping, there's a fire, and of course, Bill gets trapped by somebody in the fire, and he wakes up the next morning and he's tied up, or hog tied, I guess you could say, on a bed. And it's safe to assume that Coker has done something, and Coker has decided to kidnap a couple of sighted folks against their will in order to make them do what he thinks they should do. So we're going to find out in part 4 of the Day of the Triffids what exactly is going on and why is Bill tied up right now. And that is the end of part 3 of the Day of the Triffids. This is my part 3 review, and that is me, Deafrowe, out.